Joe in Chevy Chase, Maryland, listening on TuneIn Radio. Joe, you wanted to disagree with me about Christianity?
Well, yes.
Okay.
Your response has often been with respect to libertarians how, some claim to be Christian, but the implication you give is that the libertarian philosophy is anti-Christian.
Well, it's inconsistent with Christianity.
Well, it's not at all inconsistent with Christianity. When the Good Samaritan was praised by Jesus for helping out a person along the road, he wasn't praised because the Good Samaritan went over to a rich person and forced the rich person to help him. The Good Samaritan was praised because he did so on his own without government action. You can't say, there is not one site in the New Testament at all that says the government should come in and redistribute wealth. The renders to Caesar, what is Caesar to Caesar does not stand for that at all.
There actually is.
No, there isn't.
Yes, there is. Do you have a Bible?
Yeah.
Okay. Look up Matthew 25 and scroll down to the last roughly third. I don't have it in front of me, so I'm going to have to rely on you. But you know the riff I'm talking about, right? Where he says in the final days I'll be sitting judging, and the lambs and the sheep.
I was in prison and you visited me.
Right,
not, and all
all that stuff. Right. Read me the first sentence of that part of Matthew 25.
Okay, hang on. Thanks. If you got the time. Like the virgin took...
Matthew 25 is a rather long chapter, so it takes a minute to scroll through it, but it's down toward about 2/3 of the way through, as I recall. And in fact, in some Bibles, they even break it up by saying, the parable of the lambs and sheep and the stuff like that.
Okay, and this is when they separate the sheep and the goats.
Yes, right.
Sheep on his right hand, goats on the left.
That's right. So read me the very first sentence of that.
Yeah, then shall the king say unto them on his right hand, Come, ye blessed of my Father.
No, you're at the very end. I'm talking about the setup, where he starts telling the story, the very first sentence.
Of the chapter?
No, of that basically verse, of that story, where he's talking about...
Before him shall be gathered all nations, and
there you go.
He shall separate them one from another, as shepherds divide in sheep from the goats.
Right. Okay, now let me just set this up for you. When Jesus says nations, he's talking about nations, not individuals. He's talking about governments. Nations are governments. So he's saying we're going to decide which countries, which governments behaved well and which didn't. Read me that sentence again.
That is not at all the general understanding of what that means there.
My interpretation is not inconsistent with Catholic doctrine. In fact, my interpretation is what the Catholic Church stood on for over 800 years as the rationale for them being a nation state when they conquered and controlled most of Europe.
Well, okay, so you're in support then of the Spanish Inquisition and everything else?
I'm not in support of any of that stuff. I'm simply saying that for you to say that nobody would ever think that, in the probably the most seminal piece of the New Testament, the grandest of the grand commissions, where Jesus says, no way are you going to get into heaven unless you have fed the poor, fed the hungry, given water.
They are all individual mandates.
No, they are not.
If you go back to the Greek, it means peoples. It doesn't mean nation states. So therefore,
what does it say? Read it. It says nations.
No, but that's the one
That's the setup. He says in the last days the nations are going to be in front of me, and I'm going to be picking left from right, goats and sheep, hell to heaven.
Okay,
so all I'm saying, I'm not trying to preach Christianity here, Joe, but when you say, or anybody says, there's no place in the Bible where Jesus says that, we should redistribute your wealth, that the government should be engaged in do-gooding, I'm saying, look at Matthew 25, penultimate...
Is your interpretation of that verse that unless you vote for a politician that wants to redistribute wealth, you are sinning?
No.
Okay. Well, it has to be if that's what you think that verse means.
Well, my interpretation of that verse is pretty straightforward. That what he is saying is that in the last days, what you can believe it or not, this has to do with how you believe all this stuff plays out. But basically, in the last days, he's going to judge the nations of the world, And you know, the nation of Israel was a big deal throughout the Bible. The basically the coherence and cohesiveness of the people. You can go back into the Old Testament and look at the injunction for Jubilee. I mean, in was it Deuteronomy or Leviticus? You know, read some of Isaiah. Go, you know, there's some remarkable stuff in there about the people collectively operating in a way that's either good or evil. And I think that there's a big lesson for us all in that. Now, I'm not going to try to interpret that down to the micro. I'm not a theologian, or at least in this current moment in my life, I'm not. And I don't want to make any claims to be speaking on behalf of the Bible or religion or anything. You know, I can speak for myself. That's it. But I do know that not only does Matthew 25 set it up as the nations are going to be judged, but that the Catholic Church, as I said, used that and other places throughout the Old Testament where it appears frequently, incredibly frequently, as the rationale, and to the best of my knowledge, they've never repudiated it, and the Catholic Church is the largest faction within Christianity, as the rationale for the government being run in a way that presumably benefits the people.
Are you going to let a rebuttal or no?
Yeah, well, you got a half a minute. It's yours.
Okay. First of all, in order for you to believe that, for you to cite the Catholic Church of 100 years ago or 200 years ago is silly, because I'm sure you disagree with almost everything else the Catholic Church.
No, the Catholic Church is still a nation state, and I think they're still using that rationale.
Well, fine. Maybe
they have a seat at the United Nations.
But where? So you're saying you have to say that it is a sin to vote for a Republican?
No, you're drawing an inference. I wouldn't vote for anybody who was
a mandate. So when you say judge,
Joe, I'll give you that. I personally take it that way. I personally take that as my and my nation's mandate. I do. Joe, thanks for the call.